please give a warm welcome to Gideon Glick and Luke Kirby. Thank you for being here, both.
Thank you.
Actually, Gideon, when I introduced the show, I mentioned that you played Tobias, and but I was remiss to say that you're also story editor for the film.
Yes, I'm a writer.
I mean,
as well.
for the series. How did that come about? That you were first story editor, and then you were asked to join.
Yeah, so I met Amy and Dan. I was in season 4 of Maisel, and that's where I met them. And, you know, we have a good rapport. We like each other very much. They found out that I was a writer. They read some of my writing, and then they asked me to join the room. And they said they would get me in front of the camera one way or the other, but I assume that meant like a recurring or a guest star. Nothing as big as Tobias. But strangely, they didn't offer me the role until a month into it. And every time they talked about Tobias, they kept gesturing to me, and it was driving me like a little nuts, because I was like, why do they keep looking at me? But then they finally offered it to me, and it was a really special day.
Thank you. You're fantastic. And it's a question to the two of you. In the Paladino world, the language is so particular. And then on top of that, the choreography of the camera work is extremely intricate. Can you tell us about, I mean, you have experience from Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah. It's, Amy and Dan are very based in their writing is meticulous. And the way they wish for it to be performed is with great precision and specificity. And the thing that you have to do is kind of come very correct to the set, because then Amy will throw some, insanely choreographed, one-take shot where, there's a donkey walking through and somebody's pushing a couch that has to then come back into the shot, and there's 50 background performers doing pirouettes, and it's at a glance it looks like a horror show, and then as the crew generates the spirit of camaraderie and togetherness, we sort of try to lift it up, and it becomes this kind of this tightrope walk that we're all on, trying to get it all in one take, and it does awaken the set in a way that doesn't happen very often, where everyone feels involved in the process, and nobody wants to drop the ball, and it's incredibly rewarding when we get it right, which can take 16 hours. But
it's a lot like theater. I mean, we were talking about theater just a second ago, but it feels really alive, and you have to get it in this one moment, and everybody has to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. And so I would say in film and television, you don't get that a lot. You don't get that experience, and it's thrilling.
I was going to mention, Gideon, that with you is even more complex, because not only are you handling language and the choreography of the cameras, but you have to deal with choreography yourself, dance choreography.
Yeah, I mean, there's something, all of a sudden I was getting anxious, not that I would mess up for me, but I would mess up for the dancers, because there's only so many times that they can do it. You can, ballet is designed to do it for one night, not 18 takes in a row. And so I sort of became altruistic in a way, because I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about messing other people up.
And Luke, I wanted to ask you about her characters, Paladino. They're cruel. They tell the truth. Is part of their currency. Can you tell us about navigating her world, and in particular your character?
Yeah,
reverent characters.
Yeah, they are irreverent. I mean, I kind of think that what they do best is that they hold this balance of irreverence met with affection. I mean, Amy and Dan have, I was going to say they have great taste, but that's not appropriate. but what we're talking about. But they are they're classy people, and they care a great deal about the story that they're telling. But they don't want it to become mawkish or overly saccharine, and so they have this little device that they, as soon as that gets too close to the heartbeat, they'll pull the rug out from under you, and it's just a fascinating line that they're walking. I feel a lot of appeal to their character. I mean, you know, I love. There's a kind of viciousness that maybe it happened when they moved to New York, but I feel like they've always been doing it. There's a sort of a viciousness that they're exploring in their characters that's not about meanness. It could be perceived as cruelty, but it's about a person's yearning and need that is so severe and so frightened in the face of vulnerability that it comes across as mean, you know. But it's in an effort to kind of uphold something. Like, you know, in this show, Jack is trying to uphold this art form that he is terrified is going to get, you know, swallowed up by this whatever era we are in.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's actually one of the things that, having seen the whole series, that I find so moving about the show is that you people are your characters are trying to uphold the arts. Yeah. And at a time right now that the show to me feels so timely, at a time where the arts are, you know, are in a very precarious situation. Did you know, Gideon, I mean, the timeliness of the film when you're working on the story, writing the story?
Well, yeah, I mean, to an extent. I mean, obviously we didn't understand where we were heading politically, but we understood that, you know, it's an art form that is struggling to survive, and it has always been. I mean, ballet is one of the oldest performing art forms, and it's this vaunted thing that belongs in this crazy, crazy building, right? But what I think is so beautiful about our show is all of a sudden you're understanding its accessibility. You're understanding that it's alive, it's sexy, it's fresh, it's shot so beautifully. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but when you get to finally the finale, all of a sudden you're seeing somebody deconstruct a dance, and it's becoming viral, it's becoming accessible. And I think that there's a meta-ness to that, and I think the show really really understands that. And you know, it's funny. My dad. He's not a big arts guy, but he obviously watched it because he's a good father. And by the end, he said, "Oh my God, I love ballet." And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing." And I think to get my straight 70-year-old father from Sweden all of a sudden to be obsessed with ballet, I feel we did something really great there.
Yeah, I love your character of Tobias, because he had characters cut off, but then on top of that, he has headphones that are an extension of that aspect of his character. Can you tell us about, you know, what you're making me self-conscious?
No, he's laughing. He's laughing at Tobias. He's laughing at Tobias.
Okay.
Not at you. Everyone laughs at Tobias. Yeah, so Tobias really lives in his own world. he is a construct of his own world, and the headphones really keep him in his world. He's always listening to heavy metal. It's Amy. She won't admit this, but I think this is coming from her. She only writes when there's noise in the background. It's the only way she can concentrate, and she'll play the same movie over and over and over again while she writes. It's insane, but she's really smart and brilliant, and so is Tobias. But he has a hard time when the world in his head doesn't align when the world outside doesn't align with the world in his head, and he has a very viscerally negative response. And when he doesn't see what's in his head, it's a perfect fish out of water, right? He's somebody who can barely communicate in English, and then he gets sent to Paris, and there's a culture shock, and there's a language barrier, and he is not able to communicate what's inside to other people. And that's why when he meets Gabon, it's a fascinating relationship.
And was that helpful to you, the fact that you yourself, you're a fish out of water, and you're shooting in Paris and having to deal yourself with culture shock?
For sure, yeah. I'm pretty hearing impaired. My right ear is artificial. It's made out of my rib, and my left ear, I'm already losing hearing. So I find foreign languages to be utterly complicated, and accents to be utterly complicated. So I felt a little isolated and alienated, and I'm not method in any way, shape, or form, but it did help.
Luke, speaking of symmetry, because I'm getting ahead of myself, because we'll talk about Tobias and Gavin and the fact that you guys are, there's a symmetry happening there. With you and Charlotte, the character, that you guys seem to be almost like a mirror of each other.
I'm glad you said mirror, because the other day I brought that up with Charlotte, and she said, "No, I disagree." But now I have another person on my... Yeah, that would be like her. Or any mirror, I guess. An oppositional mirror. Yeah, no, I do think there's a kind of well, their kinship is you know, they are both people that don't have the gratification that, you know, any sort of, you know, they don't have a talent that brings adulation, the lights don't shine on them. They really love and have affection for this art form and for the company that, you know, that they're both looking after. And I think that they share a kind of, obviously they share their love for that art, but they also share a kind of frustration of, you know, that they never really fully get to have a dream realized for themselves, and they see that in one another. And yeah.
I mentioned that I spent my development years since 1978 in New York City, and one of the figures in New York City that I always was fascinated was Lincoln Kirsten,
Yes,
who
yeah.
was the head of, he was the founder of New York City
Yes,
Ballet.
yeah.
Were inspired by Lincoln at all?
Yeah, Lincoln was a real a person that I looked to a lot. Obviously, he's very different, but you know, he was famously kind of frustrated with his own sort of trajectory creatively. You know, he brought ballet to New York City and brought Balanchine there, and you know, was a Renaissance man. But you know, and had many talents, but none of them were ever met by the public with any sort of degree of seriousness. And I think he's famous for, you know, for feeling a little bit frustrated about that. Mm-hmm. But you know, obviously, like you know, Jack, to me, what was interesting about Jack was, you know, his having come from this family in New York City. You know, it made me think about what New York was when, you know, he would have grown up in the 80s when ballet was very hot there in the city. You know, there was a lot of excitement. The art world was very exciting. You know, I just had it just really sparked my curiosity about this guy.
In the 70s and the 80s in New York City, we had this bigger than life characters like Jack. You know, we had Joe Papp at the Public Theater. We had, you know, Andrea Bishop.
Yes.
We had all these huge names.
Yeah, and the culture of patronage was still very alive. That sort of what came out of the, you know, out of the war in mid-century. There was just still a huge degree of aliveness to it. And, you know, yeah, New York was a hot place. Mm-hmm. And I think for a kid, when you imagine being a kid there at that time, who had the privilege of being exposed to all of that, it would have been pretty nice to absorb. I guess I'm jealous of Jack, because I was in Guelph, Ontario.
You're jealous of Jack, or of not being in New York?
Well, maybe that, yeah. I'm not jealous of Jack's childhood, but yeah, being exposed to that stuff.
Tell me about I love his quirks and his fascination with the furniture, and how does that help you build the character?
Well, it informed, you know, Jack's persnickety. But, you know, I can relate to that. I like to keep my things neat. It's, you know, it's...
I love your suit, by the way.
Thank you.
Talk about... Like,
well, just you wait till it gets dirty. I'll be very upset. Yeah, no, that, you know, that was a sort of, that is a quirk that's his featured sort of, it's peppered throughout the show, that Jack has these sort of strange attributes and, you know, the things that sort of, I think Amy and Dan are very good at writing people who...
Very specific.
Who feel the pressure of time in a way that if they stop too long to think about it, they fear that the world will swallow them whole. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a kind of, and I do think we all have this sort of, you know, delusion of that maybe we can, if we just control things enough, we can maybe hold the inevitable at bay. And I think that's part of what's going on with Jack.
On the same line, and Gideon, since you work both as a writer in Maisel and this show, there's an immersive quality to their world, to the Paladino world, that is unlike any other TV writers and creators that we've seen. You know, tell us about that aspect. That it's immersive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm watching Gilmore Girls for the first time. Because it's so good.
So Gilmore Girls fans.
I went to the Paley Fest last month, and they were all talking about. It was Gilmore Girls, Maisel, and Étoile. And when Gilmore Girls was talked about, you could feel I would get chills in the audience because people just love it so much. And I was like, I can't believe I haven't seen this. And so I started watching it. And it's the same thing as Maisel, it's the same thing as Étoile. They know how to create worlds that you just want to be enveloped in. And I think with Étoile especially, obviously there's the ballet, it's sumptuous, it's beautiful, but it's also these people who care so deeply about what they do and keeping the art form alive. But for them, the stakes are so high, and I think anyone can get invested in that. And I think that is what kind of unites all of these weirdos in this show. And it's interesting, like,
I'm glad that you point out weirdo to point.
It's not me, it's him. Yeah. But you know, ballet is a really insular world. There's people that have been a part of this world since they were like 9 years old. And I think a lot of previous interpretations have been quite macabre and gothic. And we strove not to do that. What we wanted to do was show that it's goofy. These people are goofy people. They're people who are so one-track minded and are so disciplined and have sacrificed so much to do this and care so much. And I think that comes out in the show.
They take things very seriously in
very
this
seriously,
world.
Yeah, but born of that is joy, you know, and fun. Like there's it's a noble pursuit, you know. It's worthy of this. Of the pain. It's sort of, you know, I've seen so many things about ballet where you just go like, that's bad. I don't think people should do that anymore. But, you know, ballet is an aspirational art form. It is striving for a heightened world. And, yeah, we wanted to kind of make sure that was part of what we were doing.
Now, Gideon, when I introduced the show, I mentioned that, you know, you starred in one of the greatest Broadway musicals ever, Spring Awakening, and your background is theater. What was it like for you to now ballet, which it's in the arts, but it's a completely different potato?
Yeah, it is a different potato. I like that.
It's a potato.
It is. It's a big potato. No, you know, it was interesting. I grew up doing musical theater. It's funny, I talk about this a lot, but I worked with Bill T. Jones in Spring Awakening. He was actually very inspirational for Tobias because Bill is very exacting. He's very eccentric. He's very blunt. So I got to do musical theater. Then I sort of transitioned and started doing a lot of plays. And so I felt like I understood that art form.
Tony nominee for To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I got to do maestro, and I got to learn a lot about classical music and opera. And then I sort of felt like, how lucky am I that I get to keep doing these things that are about art? Thank God it's not sports or something, because I just wouldn't have cared. But this is something that is so beautiful. And so, it's a parallel art form, but it's an art form that I didn't know about. And so being able to invest in that, and then also just be on set, and to see these dancers do what they do, it was breathtaking. And
I got ahead of myself, and I mentioned the mirror quality of him and Charlotte. But you and it's Tobias and it's Garvin, right?
Gabon.
You know, tell us about that dynamic. That it's wonderful, and as the show develops, I don't want to spoil. It gets really juicy. The fact that you're like two sides of the coin. You know, you're caught off. He's up front. You know, tell us about working in that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Tobias is very introverted. Gabon is very not. He's very forward. He's very extroverted, but they're both people that are hard people to get along with and hard to communicate with. And through their relationship, their defenses go down, and they start to sort of be able to speak to each other through dance and then through other modes. But I don't want to spoil anything, but I think I just have.
Yeah, and ahead you will have David Byrne, and you'll have Jonathan Groff, a reunion from Spring Awakening.
We also had Didi Khan, though. People don't talk about Didi Khan.
Yeah, Didi Khan in episode, correct. Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, to have all of these guest stars is amazing. It's funny to be think back in the writer's room when we talked about David Byrne, and then we got David Byrne, and Dan texted me. He was like, we got David Byrne. And it was funny to see him be a fan of somebody, because that's the thing, is these guys are fans. They love music, they love film, they love TV. They're big, big fans. So to see like the kind of kid in him come alive, I was like, of course you got David Byrne, you're Dan Palladino. Like,
that's awesome. And then the Spring Awakening reunion with Jonathan Groff.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. That's such a good scene, just such a well-written scene. But to have Groff in the show, playing the part that he did, you know, obviously we have a lot of history, and I think that was, you could see that in the scene. But also what's so nice about Groff is he's so unassuming and he's so kind, and people just fall in love with him immediately. It's hard when you're a guest star and you come into a show and you don't know anybody. It's hard to, it's like you're a stranger at Thanksgiving dinner, basically. But with him, he's not, and everyone just sort of fell in love with him that day. And so it was a very magical day because we could see that there was something special happening.
Yeah, did he spit all over you?
he didn't.
He even makes fun of himself. If you ever see Jonathan Groff live, he sweats and spits.
Yes, the first 5 rows are called the splash zone when he performs.
Yes, yes. And then speaking of things ahead, and because they've only seen episode 1 and 2, and then the Gilmore Girl fans in the audience, Jack's mother is played by the great Kelly Bishop. Tell us about working. Who was the original chorus line, like Tony winner?
Correct. Yeah,
Kelly Bishop.
Yeah.
Her name wasn't Kelly Bishop originally in the chorus line. Yeah.
Oh, you mean her character?
Though she wasn't, when she did a chorus line, she wasn't Kelly Bishop. She was Kelly Carroll. Yeah.
Good.
And she won the tone.
Wow.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, when she was in
But
chorus
I've been listening to Everything is Beautiful at the ballet.
Why, you've been
at the
singing it?
ballet.
Yeah, I've been listening to it all week.
Well, when you look at the...
I was like, I've really got to understand this art form. And, I finally get it.
Finally today.
Yeah.
yeah. And if you look at the credits of the chorus line soundtrack, it's not Kelly Bishop.
Oh, that's great. She's tremendous. I mean, she is a treasure, absolutely. Yeah, to have her play my mommy was pretty darn sweet. I don't know that she plays the best mommy, but she's really, really fun. We did it later in the season. Well, I don't know, whatever. There's a scene, and she did a take just like vamping at a piano that we rolled for 20 minutes of her just humming along to The Girl from Ipanema because we were rapt, just utterly. She was sort of drunken and gleeful, and it was just exceptional. She's, it's so great to see these performers who have, who have that seasoned aspect, and it's something that only comes with time, where they have a kind of an ease in their body and their presence that you just are, you can literally just sit there for hours and watch them do nothing. Yeah, it's really lucky.
You both were talking about the specificity of the writing earlier, and there was one scene that you have with Cheyenne. Mm-hmm. The character is called Cheyenne, where she briefly reminisces about the New York and how things have changed. And then it just hit it. It said so much about New York, but also about your relationship. Yeah. Tell us about that scene, but also about the specificity of the writing. That things.
It's kind of it's a testament to Amy and Dan's sort of dedication and their talent. Because it's the kind of writing where if you just sort of read it without saying it out loud, you kind of get it. But when you start to say it, it starts to mean more. And the biggest thing that Amy and Dan are famous for as directors is they'll ask you to do it faster. And people don't like that as a rule. People don't think that's the greatest note. But it's actually, for them, it works because they have so much faith in you as an actor to kind of, honor the text and do whatever it is that you have to do. And in that scene, it was, those few lines capture so much about, the heartbreak of the time that, that this company is coming out of, the necessity that they feel to try to keep something alive, and also this relationship between Jack and Cheyenne that clearly has more to it than just, I hired you, and yeah, it's fascinating to get. You don't really start to understand it until you're in the moment. Mm-hmm. And it comes alive in a really beautiful way. It feels very special.
And Gideon, tell us about I am obsessed with the end credits of every show until the end, because it's almost documentary style, and we actually get to see the dancers, and I've never seen anything like in any other TV show. You know, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, originally we were going to do a lot of transitions in the show that were just going to be incidentals rather than showing, like, you know, the Paris Opera or the New York City Ballet. We wanted to show really internal things, and so we had our great photographer start to kind of just follow the dancers around. And originally that was intended for the incidentals, but then we realized how incredible this footage is. And it's a really nice way to bookend the show because, again, we were striving for authenticity here. And as I said before, we weren't trying to go for these older ideas of what ballet was. And just, it's fascinating to watch them after the show. It's fascinating every single time, and it's like I think of it as a nice palate cleanser.
Yeah, I love it. It brings a kind of verite aspect, you know, to the world that you don't see in the show. The show is so kind of elegant and precise in its choreography, and then at the end you have this kind of more you know, Amy and Dan don't like close-ups, you know, but suddenly you get this kind of more, you know, in-depth look at the world, and yeah, it's fascinating. I love it.
And how was it for you to be working with all these dancers and
amazing,
surrounded in their
I mean,
world?
they're amazing to be around. They're so dedicated. They're really like you know, they are so committed to their craft, to their work. They were really sweet with me. When I would walk in the room, they would kind of sit up. So they made me feel like the director of the company. I mean, it was just the sweetest thing. Oh. You know, they kind of would get a bit shy and say like, "Oh, hello, Jack," and you know, it was really, really, really great. Yeah.
I always loved hating my body, just hating it. My posture's horrible. These dancers have the most exquisite bodies in the world, so I always felt I got a complex.
And I have to ask you, Gideon, one of my favorite actresses of all time is Charlotte Gainsbourg. And how is it working with the great Charlotte?
It's extraordinary. You know, it's funny. There's a scene, in episode 2 where she's trying to get me into the car. And I'm really acting there because all I want to do is get into the car with Charlotte Gainsbourg. 'Cause she is so charming and so compelling and so, you know, she's French royalty.
Yeah, of course.
She is
Serge
royalty.
Gainsbourg and
But she doesn't feel that way. I mean, she's very earthy. She is very gentle. She's very wispy, and you just want to. She's just the coolest person in the world. Mm-hmm. But I would say, like, but French women, man, they're all so amazing. Like Lou Delage, you just like. I think we both kind of fell in love with.
But you got the better end of the stick because he's in New York City slumming it, and then you're in Paris.
Oh yeah, I have a fabulous life. Fabulous. But his office is on a set in Paris. So when you see us walking down the hallway and you think you're in New York, and then you go into his office, we just traveled across the world.
Wow.
That's true. I did get to live in Paris for the whole shoot, so I just had to not, you know. I had to hide my smile.
And pretend that you were in...
Yeah, that's right. Miserable.
Drabby New York City.
Yeah, boring old New York.
And speaking of favorite actors, Simon Callow.
Yeah.
I adore him.
Yeah.
Tell us about working with him. He's delicious in this show.
Well, yes, he's amazing. We've been with him this week, and he is just... He is...
You sound like him.
He does a good Simon.
Well, I mean, Simon can tell you about anything and everything that has to do with anything and everything that you're curious about. I mean, it's really, he is just an endless supply of information.
Well, he is.
He's so good at distilling it. He's so eloquent.
Oh, he makes it all
it's
sound
like poetry.
so beautiful, and he'll talk about
a crumb.
A crumb. He'd go, and it was the most beautiful crumb that I'd ever tasted. I knew when I was 7, I saw a crumb, and it was on a flat white sheet, and I put it in my mouth. I tasted Valhalla. I was, he's I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Not as incredible as Gideon, but
I don't have good stories
you know,
about
he's,
crumbs.
I mean, you know, and he's also Simon's a writer. He's written
Charles,
three.
the definitive Charles Lawton biography.
Charles Lawton, Orson Welles.
Yeah.
He did.
I'm embarrassed to say that I've read them.
Oscar. Why be embarrassed?
Yeah, well, because I'm supposed to be a film geek, not a,
Right. Yeah.
not a reader.
Geek, not a geek.
Yeah.
Yes, and as a performer, he is so playful. I mean, we've watched him for however long we've been able, you know, Mr. Beebe.
Yeah, Room with a View.
Yeah. My wife.
Mr. Beebe.
Yes, my wife says that it was Simon Callow was the first penis that she saw in Room with a View.
And you're
And
you're the
then
last.
you were the second.
And
I was the
last.
second.
And the
Yeah,
last.
that's right.
And
Well, we turned the lights off. Let's be honest. Come on.
Well, on that
Saw.
note, thank you both. Thank you both for being here. You guys are delightful.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody. Spread the word.